It's kicking off. All right, cool. So thanks everybody for joining us today to talk through Sasanka's journey of building a really amazing presence on Glassdoor. To kind of give you a little bit of background, Sasanka and I have known each other for a while. We're both entrepreneurs here in Boston, and we were meeting a couple weeks ago, and I remember just sort of checking out your guys' Glassdoor page prior to the meeting and being blown away just by spectacular reviews, lots of reviews, and thinking, how did this guy do this? What's their secret? And so I really was looking forward to having this conversation and thought this is an interesting topic, top of mind for a lot of people out there in the HR world. So why don't we just sort of broadcast it and share the knowledge with everybody? To give you a little bit of background on myself before I turn it over to Sasanka, my name is Phil Strazzulla. I'm one of the founders of NextWave Hire. If you're on this webinar, you've probably read our blogging content or maybe checked out one of our webinars before. Again, we're based in Boston, and we're a software company that helps employers tell their story through employee testimonials that get into what's it really like to work at your company. We go really deep, we collect hundreds of stories, and then we use those authentic employee testimonials to share your culture on your career site and your talent communities and your social media, etc. So that's a little bit about my background. Sasanka, do you mind giving a little bit of your background and we can take things from there?
Yeah, sure. Phil, thanks for having me. As Phil mentioned, I'm one of the Boston founders here. I started a company. We are a platform that's fundamentally changing the way companies hire early career sales talent. So we exclusively focus on the SDR, or sales development representative role. We help companies ramp those reps up very quickly through a modern online training. And now we've started to gain traction in the third piece of the platform, which provides continuous and ongoing development for these early career tech or just sales professionals. And a little bit about my background, I wasn't essentially a classic startup guy, right? I started my career at GlaxoSmithKline, and one of the reasons I spent 7 years in a large company corporation like GSK was the development that they provided, the experience that they provided prior to even the interview process, right? They had been working with me from the time I was a junior in college through days before I started my first day and flew to the Philadelphia campus. From GSK, I went to a startup called Afanova, very, very different look and feel. We again, we're trying to build a brand there. And now even in our startup, when you start with one person and your first dollar in, certainly you learn about the importance of culture, employee branding, and all those kind of things. So happy to be on this with you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing a little bit about your story. The other thing that I should mention, and there's a link right below the video, but if you have questions throughout this that you want myself or Sasanka to answer, please feel free to tweet those at NextWave Hire, and we'll be monitoring the Twitter handle for that. So if you mention at NextWave Hire in the question, we will answer your question in real time. So Sasanka, one of the things that I guess we're going to get to is sort of like the effort and the strategy behind building out a compelling presence on a review site like Glassdoor. And I guess, because there's effort, there's a reason to have that effort. And I'm kind of curious from your perspective, what was your rationale for initially wanting to build out a stronger presence on employer review sites? Was there a particular reason why you chose Glassdoor? Can you just sort of walk us through like why you went down this path of actually spending time on this?
Yeah, so when we talk about early career professionals, right? We're talking about, certainly for employers out there, you're thinking people that are coming out of school or a couple of years of experience. But, we think of it a little bit differently. We're thinking about it, while they're in school. What are they looking for out of a company that they want to join, that they want to be part of. And in sales, it's fundamentally changed. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, colleagues of mine, friends of mine were asking, which company paid out the most bonuses? How can I earn X amount of dollars? And that shift now, when you talk to recent grads or people in schools and universities where we spend a lot of time, the questions aren't so much around money. They're about the culture of an organization. They're about the development programs that an organization provides. And with the companies that we work with today, and sure, Phil, I know you're familiar with them as well. They don't do an effective job in telling that story. And so now you've got this pool of great talent, right, that are coming out of colleges and universities, or talent that, quite honestly, has switched into a job and they're looking for something else. And where do they go? They go to sites like Glassdoor to review a company. And a lot of times on Glassdoor, we see employers not spending enough time on it. And so, the ratings are misconstrued. The stories are by disgruntled employees, right? They haven't put in the time and effort. And we realized very, very quickly for us to, number one, draw in talent for our platform, but also to, advise and help other companies that they need to be doing a better job. So that was the first step in realizing, that how important sites like Glassdoor or other free sites are to utilize. And yes, it does take effort. We can talk about that. But if you don't, you're at risk at losing great talent. And just listen to, the next time you're interviewing a recent grad or somebody with, again, a couple of years of experience, just listen to what they're looking for. How did they find out about your company? What did they do to seek out the information to then apply to the organization?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So the first thing that hits me is, I think especially for salespeople, you generally think that they're very cash comp driven. Right. I think that's a stereotype, and maybe it's true to an extent where, salespeople, it's like, hey, I'm going to do a really hard job. I want to make sure I'm able to make money. But what you're finding is, even within the ranks of salespeople who are, or maybe the most sort of like compensation driven, the conversation over the last 10 years has changed a lot to, okay, what's the culture like? What's the training program like, et cetera, which is kind of cool. And yeah. One thing that I think is interesting about your business, so just to clarify, everybody on the phone, obviously Sasanka mentioned this earlier, but you basically, one, you have a business, you have a company, correct. And you're drawing in sort of that young talent, and then you're also helping to eventually transition those people to other organizations. And one of the things, and you're essentially partnering with those organizations to help with their own sort of talent acquisition needs within this, sales development rep space. One of the things I remember we talked about a couple of weeks ago was you actually have people that go through your program, these SDRs, and they might get 10 different offers to interview, and they're actually not accepting some of those offers because they go to a company's career site, and it's kind of like, what's it like to work at this company? Sure. And I would imagine that, for like the topic of today, like the content on your career site is super important, but also obviously the content of your Glassdoor pages is really important. And I'm sure there's people that go through your program that are either generally speaking turned off by that content, or perhaps they're just not really understanding the sort of value props of like why I'd go work at that company. Is that a good assumption, or? Yeah,
that's correct. I'll even be more blunt than that, right? For the audience, which is, we are a business. We've got 97 clients, and we have vetted through specifically for that role over 2.5 years, over 20,000 applications, and our team has had 1,000 conversations with potential candidates or applicants for our program that eventually go into an SDR BDR role, and we've trained and placed 264 BDRs and SDRs. And what we've seen is not that they actually won't even entertain an offer from what otherwise are great companies that are growing, and these are large companies, because of their Glassdoor reviews. And that makes it difficult for us because we're sort of stuck in the middle, right? And it's tough to tell a founder, a CEO of a $50 million or $100 million company that, listen, you're losing out the top talent, and this is what we're hearing. Of course, they're not going to tell you that. We're not in that business, but it's very detrimental to hiring, and especially to your point, the sales and the fundamental shift. And even though we talk about sales, it's applicable in other roles as well, and we've seen that and heard it as well.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, you talk about basically there's been, it seems, this sort of change in candidate behavior over the last 10 years, and maybe part of it's millennials and like a slightly different value system. I think part of it is sort of like our consumer behavior around how we purchase anything, right? Like, how did I buy this shirt? I probably went on review sites and like did some research before buying it, and that sort of behavior bleeds over into our job search, which is like the ultimate purchasing decision essentially, which makes all these things really important. And you're seeing firsthand that, look, like the candidates, the people that we work with, the people that go through our program, the decision to apply or not apply is made or broken based on this employer branding stuff. These companies that are 50 million, this is how they're going to get to 100 million, or the $100 million company, that's how they're going to get to 200, is by having more of these people in their organization, and importantly, the higher quality ones who are even more discerning.
Right.
It's pretty interesting. So I think what I'm super curious about, and I think what I'd like to make the meat of the topic today is really, how did you do this magic? How did you get a 4.8 star rating, and how did you get all these reviews? Like, what's sort of your process by which you actually built out this really stellar brand on Glassdoor?
Sure. So it starts with kind of the first step is recognition, right? So recognition, whether you're in a large company and you're working in an HR group, or you're a smaller company, and recognition among stakeholders, relevant stakeholders, that means not just the director of people operations, not just the director of HR, but the hiring managers of the importance of Glassdoor. That's step one. Okay. Step two is delivering a transparent, honest, but exceptional experience for not just the person that signs that offer letter, right, within your organization, but the people that are coming through the doors of your organization to interview, whether that's sales, customer support, customer success, or so forth, right? So what does that experience look like? So for us, we create materials to help educate, these early career sales reps, right, or potential reps, so they feel empowered with the right information, that what they're getting into when they work with LaunchSource, right? This is a competitive program, and here's some of the things you're going to need to do to qualify and move forward in our program. So building that experience, and we worked really, really hard in the beginning, and we even slowed down acquiring new customers because we focused on building that tremendous and excellent experience, right? And then third, building it into your process about the ask. And today, what we've seen is, within your first 12 months, we threw the word out first, millennials, and certainly this is applicable for other roles, but certainly millennials, remember, We're people that put stuff out, and I'm on the tail end of it, but on social media. We're people that look at Glassdoor, whether or not we got a job, but we think about the experience that we went through. So if you do hire somebody, ask them and thank them, for going through that experience, and say, hey, if your experience through hiring or through our process was great, please write a review, but always leave it open. Here's what's critical about this, for them to give that candid feedback. And I think sometimes, we look at our team and we actually love feedback, right? Where if you look at some of the reviews, 4.8, they're a reminder of where we need to fix in terms of that experience. So it's really that three-step process. Number one, recognition the importance of free sites like Glassdoor. Number two is really aligning and delivering that exceptional experience for people that sign the offer letter, of course, within the first 90, 120 days and so forth. But even before that, for the candidates that are coming through your organization and interviewing. And then finally, that third step is for those great younger people. Remember, they're energized. This is either their first job, or second, it's a job that they're transitioning to, and they're excited about working and starting in their role. So just asking them, and we actually have a template that we send out to candidates, say, hey, here's some extra resources, and if you wouldn't mind, our brand will grow to write an honest, sincere feedback on Glassdoor. So those are the three steps at the highest level.
Awesome. I've got about 100 questions for you, but we actually have a question from the audience here. And again, if you have questions, just tweet at NextWave Hire, or what this person just did is there's actually like a little chat widget down the bottom of the screen, and you can use that as well if you're not on Twitter or something like that. And so somebody just asked, Sasanka, what was a challenge you ran into when doing this at LaunchSource? Maybe what are some of the pitfalls that you guys ran into, maybe things that you got wrong?
Yeah, so nobody has admitted this on my team, but I think someone, in the first or second review, wrote a review that I didn't feel was genuine. That's the transparent the pitfall of this, right? You want to be very careful about having people that are just going to write, whatever, or giving them, and like the language to write on Glassdoor. You want this to be an authentic experience, right? And if you haven't figured out how to deliver that candidate experience, right? That's something I think both Phil and I know a little bit about through our experiences. And so a pitfall is really making sure that you're, especially with early career employees, that if they didn't have a great experience, that it's okay to write how they feel or on there, and it's going to make us better, right? Your organization, mine, or anybody in the audience. That's the first thing. I've got emails from candidates that have asked, said, hey, can you please write me what you want me to put on Glassdoor? And that is a absolute pitfall. Do not do that. And I would say the second thing is, this needs to be a process that's bought in within your organization. So certainly as a co-founder and as the CEO and starting a company is really tough. I'm doing a million different things to get the company going. But what I quickly realized is, I was doing this in a silo with our first couple of companies as we're slowly, getting 20, 30 candidates through our program. And so the second thing is really evangelizing and getting consensus from a couple of different people within your organization. And I know there's a lot of HR people, operations people, operations individuals on the webinar. I would argue you really need to go to your managers that are hiring and get their buy-in, because they can provide you with the resources and some of the language that you can provide those candidates. And what do I mean by that? So we simply don't just say, hey, write a review on Glassdoor. We thank people for, helping our startup grow by being part of our program in one shape or form, whether you get accepted and move forward, or you actually go through the program or placed and you're trained with one of our companies. And so really making sure that we thank them, we provide resources that are relevant to the first 90 days of their job. And then the third is, hey, in bold, if you wouldn't mind, right, could you write a review or how you think on Glassdoor? And I'm happy to share that with anyone in the audience if they want to reach out to me, or you, for that matter. But what you've got to do is make sure you've got that template built in, and you're not overly just selecting, that person looked great or sounded great, and I want to send him and ask. This needs to be a consistent process that you're doing, and not everybody's going to respond, by the way. Not everybody's going to respond, and that's okay, but it needs to be consistent, predictable, and repeatable.
Got it. Yeah, it's interesting. Most people, I think, have upsetting experiences with people leaving negative reviews, and for you is actually the opposite, where somebody just left this like very overly positive review that you read it and you were like, well, this isn't really genuine, and that's not really what we're going for. And I think it's a really good point, because this isn't about manufacturing something that's not true or inauthentic. It's not about holding a gun to someone's head and saying, hey, you need to write a review. Okay, like this is what we need to do. It's really about encouraging people to be part of the mission, which is let's grow this thing. Let's grow our company. Let's hire more awesome people like you. And how do we do that? Well, one part of it is Glassdoor. So can you leave a 10-minute review? I've certainly seen reviews that were very obviously written by HR or the CEO. The giveaway there is, cons, none that I can think of.
Sure.
And having a couple of reviews that say something to that effect immediately after a negative one. I've also seen on Glassdoor companies or reviews that people have left that said, my company's asking me to do this. Or something to that effect. And I've only seen a couple of those, but I would imagine those are just as damning, because they kind of cast a shadow over all of your other positive reviews. So I think that's a really interesting point. One question that I had was, especially it's kind of this first step in the 3-step process, getting recognition here. How did you get the rest of your organization to buy into this? Was it a meeting and you're the boss and you're just like, look guys, this is important. Everybody needs to get on board here. Did you do any sort of like research or were there anecdotes?
Yeah.
Like how did you get everybody to buy in?
Yeah. So 3 parts of research, right? So first was qualitative, which was, when we first started, we were deeply ingrained in universities and colleges and talking to people, not just people that were interested in sales, but just what are you looking for in an organization, right? How are you going about the job search process? And Glassdoor started to come up a little bit, but not as much as I would think, or not as much as, for me to hear to make an action. Okay. The second was, if you go to Glassdoor, they've actually created some materials, and 89% of the people that visit Glassdoor are millennials, right? So for us, thinking about your ideal candidate profile, whether that's engineering, whether that's sales or customer support, for us, 98% of our applicants are millennials. So we knew, like, wow, this could be a compelling site. So I talked about, then the third part was having the 8,000 conversations. So certainly I didn't say Sasanka, Atapattu had those 8,000 conversations. It was my team. And my team was hearing that as well, right? And so again, when we were doing, kind of the university colleges, it was 1 or 2 people like learning a little bit about this, but we didn't think it was as important. Second, when identified research, and there's tons and tons of research even outside of Glassdoor today, on LinkedIn, on ZipRecruiter, about the importance, right, of reviews and culture and so forth. And sharing that information with your other stakeholders, whether those are hiring managers or so forth. And third, just listening to potential candidates or applicants that are coming through your interview process. And those questions sound like, so how did you hear about LaunchSource, right? Who told you about them? And we often hear, I would say, 3 out of 5 conversations today. 3 out of 5 we hear. So I saw you guys on Glassdoor, right? And you guys have great reviews, and I thought I would check you guys out. That's essentially the vernacular they use. It wasn't, I saw you on Glassdoor, I'm going to join, right? It wasn't, I saw you on Glassdoor, but that's pretty cool that people like myself are reviewing your company, right? Providing that information, and those conversations, again, were held by a lot of people on our team. So that's how we built consensus and were able to move forward.
Very interesting. So here's what I'm wondering. You mentioned a little bit about the sort of process by which you actually get these reviews. I'm wondering if you could dive into a little bit around the specifics of when you ask people, how you ask people to leave reviews. Do you give them any guidance? And also, I was really interested in the materials that you put together throughout the candidate process, and also it sounds like onboarding as well, which it seems like maybe corroborates sort of what you're building as an employer brand, a talent brand, and also sets expectations for candidates who are coming in. Basically, this is what the program is, this is what you can expect, blah, blah, blah. And I guess what I'm wondering is, like, how does that relate to your process down the road of collecting those reviews? And my guess is that you set expectations, you beat expectations, and you ask for the feedback or the helping hand. But I'm curious to hear exactly how that works.
Sure. So step one is any candidate that comes through our program, whether they're placed or come to our development program, which is online, they are offered an opportunity for free to go to our website and go through a short career prep course, right? So providing candidates something that I'm not asking them for something, I'm trying to help them, right? Number one. Number two, the resources that we provide aren't LaunchSource is the best company, here's something to read by LaunchSource. They're actually aggregated by other third parties. So for example, SalesLoft is a great company in our space, in the sales development space, right? And they produce some great content and kind of a modern approach to that SDR career development plan. So we know now recent or early career professionals are really looking for a place to grow their career. So that is a resource that I will provide. And for the candidate, it says, wow, they're actually utilizing other resources, right? Harvard Business Review, that's another great resource that shows candidates, wow, these guys, follow a leading piece of literature, right? And so these resources aren't just resources that we sort of make and we provide, although, with my marketing guy is probably like, hey, we're going to make some of our own, but again, goes to that genuine experience, right? And so it's a couple of those resources that are outside your company that would help. And then the ask of Glassdoor. So that's kind of the short term. In an email, we do that essentially after a couple of days, usually 3 business days after a candidate has come through our program. And we do it regardless of if they're selected or move forward or not. So we make it kind of universal. So if you look at some of our reviews, you may even see candidates that say, or applicants that say, hey, LaunchSource didn't really work out for me, but here was the experience that I had. And I think that's really compelling, for an employer that imagine if they applied and they didn't make it through that final round, and then they go to Glassdoor and they write, I didn't make it through the final interview, but I had an amazing experience through the interview process, meeting with this person or that person, and I learned a lot. That's really compelling, right? And your second question is, how do we intend to kind of scale this, I think, or think about this? So number one is staying in tune with the latest resources on your company space, or supporting that role, right? So if it's sales, are you providing them with literature that is current on the evolution of sales, right? There's a big movement right now around sales. We're having the most innovation in sales than we ever have. So what that means is, the article that you read in 2007 and you have that PDF somewhere, that probably won't be the best resource. So you've got to stay in tune with the resources that you have. Number two is you've got to create, I think, a systematic way of engaging what we call those passive candidates or so forth. So again, I know this is something you know pretty well, Phil, but you've got to create a way that continues that experience. And so I think that's the piece. Certainly, we're not part of that today, but some of the things we think about is building events, having events, which we've been successful at, inviting people, talking about LaunchSource's mission as a company, which is essentially developing the next generation of leaders, right? So that type of verbiage that connects with these recent grads and early career professionals really works.
Awesome. Yeah, it reminds me a lot of inbound marketing. I was just writing a blog post this morning, co-writing it with one of our customers about inbound recruiting, and it's exactly what you're talking about, right? It's providing useful information around the talent pools that you're trying to attract, like things that they would be interested in. And some of that is information that you're creating, or this mini sort of like professional development course. Part of it is aggregating other sources from reputable people like SalesLoft, et cetera, online, offline, all that good stuff. Pretty interesting. And I think that, inbound marketing came about because companies were sick of getting disrupted in their days by outbound sales in some respects. And I think that model has changed a lot over the last 10 years. And inbound recruiting is coming up because, again, a lot of these hard to reach candidates are, their heads down, they're doing their job, and they want that interesting professional development sort of information. And that's many times what builds a relationship with people and builds, that rapport, which turns into somebody being part of your talent communities or somebody you actually hire.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting what you just said, right? In terms of, remember those candidates that applied and you've probably neglected, they could be an advocate for you, right? So what are you doing to keep that person engaged? There's been several times where a candidate hasn't made through our program, and 8 months later, they've found a job and they've said, hey, check out LaunchSource, right? As a place where you can, start or transition a career. So I think that's a really, really important point, that every person that applies to your site, right? Certainly, I get it as a company that receives over 500 applications for one role a week, right? I certainly understand that people that are vetting through resumes are like, oh my God, what does this look at? We kind of turn that on the other way and say, hey, this could be an opportunity, right? And ensuring that you're not only delivering that experience on that first touch, but a continuous process to engage with them, because they could be in the future a source of the next role that you're trying to hire, whether it's that same role or another role in terms of engineering or customer support or customer success or so forth.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, especially if they had a good experience with you and you're keeping them up to date. Great source for you guys. One thing I think that a lot of people struggle with is do I start building my employer brand first, or do I work on my culture first? So let's say we've got a company that maybe we've got some holes in our culture, and I don't know if you have a perspective on this or not, because I don't necessarily know if you guys really went through this problem. But it's kind of like, okay, do I want to go and build my employer brand and do all this stuff on Glassdoor, my career page, etc., or do I want to spend the next 6 months trying to figure out how do we just create a better culture and then share that now better culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would we have a lot of data and anecdotal data around this. It's culture first, right? Because just think about it. So, if you work on your employer brand, right, and you've got, you're in an organization of 250 people or above, or even 1,000 or 2,000. The larger the organization, I'm sure you can find people to help you build that employer brand through Glassdoor within your organization. But if it's not aligned with that experience of people, how they interview, going through that process pre-job offer, then the system falls apart. And we've actually witnessed this with companies where, at the surface, they look like aggressive, growing companies that have, great cultures. We've visited their sites. We've talked to the chief people officers. They've talked about the benefits. And then, candidates have gone in, applied, and had a horrific experience, right? And so, the person wasn't there for the interview. Somebody barged in with their oatmeal, right? So these are things that, you can start to build your employer brand, but if you don't have a culture around delivering that exceptional candidate experience pre and post hire, it goes back to the point we talked about earlier, right? Around transparency, authenticity, right? And it will actually hurt you because those people that come through your organization, they're just going to go out and say this company is a crock, right? Like they don't have a consistent system, they don't have a process, yet they have all these Glassdoor reviews, and I can promise you that will change and affect you very, very quickly.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. I think that, and what's also kind of note here is that you're talking about the candidate process in addition to post hire, which is really important because I think everything kind of fits together. That's and right. I've known companies that maybe don't have their act together. Maybe they're growing too quickly. Maybe they're just a bit disorganized, and it hurts people's perceptions. And I think that it takes a lot to change the first impression, right? First impressions really matter.
Right.
One of the last things I wanted to chat about here was, when we think about building our employer brand, you've mentioned a couple other aspects beyond employer review sites that are important, whether that's the candidate experience, etc. We talk a lot about career pages, authentic content that dives into, what's it like to be a SDR, engineer, etc. at a company, talent communities, social media. What are some of the other touch points that you guys have focused on that we haven't talked about today you think are important?
Yeah, within the first 12 months of a hire, especially those people that you're bringing in, right out of school, right? This is the first work experience for them. Make sure that this is a continuous process of checking in with them, right? Number one, how's it going? Did you, and this is for, really the HR and people operations groups of, this is a check and assessment for you on, did you live up to your brand promise, right? Did you live up to your what you've created, which hopefully by now is a culture, right? Transparency, and an awesome process to gain those reviews and so forth. And during that process of the first 12 months or so, and I'll talk about why it's so important in the first 12 months, you want to try to get, what we do is we try to get people that come through our program to write stories, right? And blog posts and utilizing that because, that is a connection that, this generation is looking for. They're less interested in Sasanka Atapattu, being a CEO, 15 years of experience. They don't connect with that. Certainly I, looked at, the Jack Welches and the different CEOs and leaders that I could follow and did a lot of reading on that. But today, when I talk to candidates, it's about, hey, I saw this candidate, Susie Smith, and she wrote a great story about, what it's like to be in sales, what it's like to be in the organization, right? And for us, it's not around a specific employee, right? It's around the role, because as the SDR, sales development role, is predominantly growing, but there's a huge gap in terms of knowledge and awareness in colleges and universities and the marketplace. So I think it's really important, whether you as the HR person, you as a SDR manager, or anyone interested in HR, is either figuring out and doing this yourself of these check-ins, or finding somebody on your team that's doing this consistently, right? Maybe you create it, put it in their MBO, and then you collect those stories and you essentially evangelize that. So certainly understand companies have limited resources in this, but it's really, really important.
Yeah, I like to think of it, I like to bring all this stuff back to sales and marketing. And we're big fans of companies that utilize these sort of like employee blog posts, employee testimonials, whatever you want to call them, because I think at the end of the day, to have a video of you saying, hey, we're really, innovative company, blah, blah, blah. People are like, okay, thanks, Mr. CEO. But if there's 10, SDRs who are like, hey, here's what I do, here's what I did before this, it allows people to basically find their tribe in your organization and say, hey, this is me, this is what I want to do. Or I think as importantly, say, wow, I thought this was totally different. Like, I didn't really know what it was like to be a salesperson. And this is what it's like to be a salesperson. Okay, this is not for me. I'm actually thinking more along the lines of like, my life could be better in marketing or something like that. And I think that's great too, because we don't want to hire people who aren't going to be happy at the end of the day, or maybe there's another role in the organization that they would just want to opt into. And I guess the sales and marketing analog here is customer testimonials. And we all know when we buy a piece of software or anything kind of like B2B or B2C, we want to understand, how do people use this product? How do people use this golf club, or how do people use this sales automation tool before we actually make the decision? And that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yep. And it's certainly not an easy process, right? I mean, a former customer came to me, and he was on a reference call. So you've got a couple of ways you can do it. It can get certainly messy in that process if you don't have it organized. But I think you pointed out a great point about that tribe, right? Today, you've got a generation of workers that will be, again, the millennials, right? 75%. We will be 75% of the workforce very, very soon. And myself included, looking for work-life balance, looking for, places where I can learn and grow a career and so forth. And so I'm certainly not going to, GE's new CEO, right, who's built an awesome corporate brand, or Ford or so forth. I'm going to talk to people that I understand, people like you, Phil, that, have been on the journey. And it's the same thing when you think about it and you're drawing in talent. They want to see, testimonials from people like themselves, so that they can feel, number one, empowered, and feel like they can be successful and excited about a place that they can join.
That's awesome. So I think those are the sort of questions and topics I wanted to cover. Is there anything that you would offer as a final piece of advice if, you know, your cousin came to you tomorrow and was like, hey, you know, I'm going to try to build out a reputation on Glassdoor. Any last piece of advice, anything we didn't cover here?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I gave some tactical steps, and certainly there were high level stuff. And I think number one, you know, what's working for our organization may not work for yours, right? Certainly, you know, for one role, I don't know how many companies are getting over 500 applicants a week. So it's a little bit of A/B and testing, right? If you're an organization that does have strong resources, you know, we're building those. But if you're an organization that has great resources, you know, provide that and see how that works, and really, you know, see how they're engaging with you. Second, the world, the modern workforce is changing and evolving very, very fast. So what has worked for you if you've had an approach to building your employer brand in the past? I can tell you in 2.5 years, you know, our business has changed, and, you know, the type of candidates that are coming in have changed. So stay ahead of the curve by, you know, reading, you know, whether it's your blog or other blogs. I look at Glassdoor, I subscribe to ZipRecruiter and podcasts to really educate myself and stay ahead of the game. And then the final piece of advice I would offer is when you've had a candidate, and this goes to early career, senior career, executive level, as I've interviewed those people for other roles outside of LaunchSource, come through your company, right? And they've interviewed, and whether they have been successful and they actually get the offer or not, there's one question, if you're a head of HR or in people operations, that you should ask. And that question was, how did we do in terms of the interview process? Very simple, right? How did we do? What was your experience like? Because if you don't ask that question and you try to build arbitrarily a culture in a process, and then you're working on your employer brand, you might miss something, like the one person who always shows up late to interviews, right? That you don't know about, but it's on, you know, your calendar and his calendar or her calendar, but she's always or he's always late, and that might not have something to do with, you know, the culture that you built or the strategy that you've built on your employer brand, right? So don't miss those steps. And all it takes is, you know, when you've told that candidate, and I've seen the automated emails, you know, thank you for your time. You haven't been, you know, offered a job at this time, but let's stay in touch, right? That's not genuine to me, right? That's not genuine to me. Is select some people and say, want to have a quick 5-10 minute chat. And I know this takes some time, but how do we do? Right? Or sending them some sort of survey. If you're a very large organization, that's very quick, you know, no more than 5 questions that they can answer, and collect that feedback to help you build your strategy.
Yeah, I love it. I'm big on feedback. And in fact, everybody on the webinar today can expect to get an email from me asking for feedback on this. And please be honest. It's totally anonymous, so you can tell me whatever you want. But that said, Sasanka, thank you so much for sharing a bit of your story, your philosophies, your tactics, and the high level as well. I hope that everybody who tuned in enjoyed it and got something out of it that they can take and use in their day-to-day. And we will also be posting this on our blog in the next couple of days here with a little bit of a summary. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the day, everybody.
All right, guys. Take care.